I've invited Alex Wilkes on the program. She is an executive director of America Rising. Alex, good to have you back on the program.
Thank you so much for having me, Lars.
So it's my pleasure, but given all the nonsense about Judge Kavanaugh, he's got two women accusing him of two different things. They appear to have no witnesses. Even the news organizations that are reporting the second accusation say, we interviewed dozens of people and couldn't find anybody to back up her story. And I think Dr. Christine Ford is in a similar spot because she's now saying of the 2 or 3 or 4 or as many as 5 people, depending on which story she's told, they can't find anybody who backs up her story. And yet with Keith Ellison, the representative who's now running for AG, there seems to be abundant evidence, maybe not proof, but evidence in the form of police reports, medical reports, and the rest from the young lady who is now his ex-girlfriend, Karen Monahan. Tell me what we should make of this.
Well, I think that the differences that you've seen between the two incidents here, where we have Judge Kavanaugh being accused by 2 women with 30-year-old accusations and Keith Ellison's accusations from his former girlfriend, is that in the case of the former girlfriend, there's substantial corroboration of the claims that she's making. You know, whether that's the medical testimony or, you know, the recording of her thoughts in various places, text messages, things of that nature. There are ways to indicate that she is being truthful and is accurate in the way that she recalls things and the way that things happened. And that's something that any prosecutor is going to look for in any kind of criminal case where they have someone on the stand, a victim. They want to make sure that they can point to all of these little markers of evidence to say, this is why what she is asserting or what he is asserting is true. And I think that in the case of Judge Kavanaugh's accusers, you don't have that same corroboration from people who were contemporaries of the accusers or of Judge Kavanaugh. And in fact, most of the people who have spoken out about these charges have been people who have said, I wasn't at the party. I never saw Brett Kavanaugh do these things. That's not the Brett Kavanaugh that I know. And so I think that that's where you really see a difference here. And to me, it's all the more damning of the media and of the Democrats refusal to acknowledge this double standard, because in the case of Keith Ellison, here you have a major leader of the Democratic Party, someone who's a current candidate for Attorney General, the chief law enforcement official in the state of Minnesota, should he be elected. You have these incredibly credible claims against him that are current and that are corroborated, and you have almost no coverage of that coming from the media.
Yeah, it really is a double standard. And I guess one of the things that was, a bit persuasive to me on the Debbie Ramirez accusations against Kavanaugh, not persuasive of her story, but the refutation of it is, this woman said she had to sit for 6 days talking to lawyers, Democrat activist lawyers, with them apparently saying, was it Brett Kavanaugh? Well, if she claims to have a clear recollection, not much else that night, but she sure remembers it was definitely Brett Kavanaugh after I've thought about it for 6 days and talked to lawyers about it, the thing that bears against that is she apparently had a friend from college whose wedding she attended. And we've all attended weddings and taken pictures, but Brett Kavanaugh was one of the people at that wedding as a guest, and she apparently stood right next to him and had a smile on her face. And I thought, I know for certain that if my wife or my adult stepdaughter had ever had a man do to her what Debbie Ramirez says Brett Kavanaugh did to her, that she wouldn't stand next to him and take a picture at a wedding. It's another thing when they say, well, a woman's trying to preserve her job in an employment situation. But this was completely an optional item, and she stands at the wedding next to the guy who put his privates in her face at one point, and really, did something horrible if you believe her story, and yet she's standing next to him smiling at a wedding. Doesn't make any sense to any reasonable person, I think.
No, it doesn't. And I think that It's just one of the many factors that really calls into question the New Yorker's reporting on this and the media's subsequent coverage. Here you have a second accuser who is coming out and saying that after she was pursued by Democratic officials to come out and tell her story, and was pursued by a number of media organizations who had heard these rumors to come out, that she had to think deeply for 6 days before coming to the conclusion that it was indeed Brett Kavanaugh who had assaulted her in this way. And I find that to be very troubling. I find the fact that, she hired, a very partisan attorney in the same way that Professor Ford did as well. These are, people who, in the case of Professor Ford, they had to remove their names off of a fundraiser for Tammy Baldwin, a senator from Wisconsin who's up for re-election this coming year. So, I don't, I think that there are a lot of holes in these stories, and the media is not doing these women a service in sort of putting these out here as facts, because at the end of the day, we're hopefully going to have testimony on Thursday that comes from Judge Kavanaugh, that perhaps comes from Professor Ford, maybe others. And I think that what all Americans can agree on is that we can agree on fairness here. We can agree that there should be an equal opportunity for both sides to present, and then for the senators and for the country to weigh that against all of what we know about these individuals. And for Brett Kavanaugh, that record is lengthy. This is a person who has a number of validators, both personal and professional, that really call into question the veracity of these claims. And so, I think that this is, these kind of gaps in the story are sort of glossed over by the media. And they're, I think, gaps that are going to become very apparent when you have two people that are testifying under oath.
I don't know if you'd seen it yet, Alex. I'm talking to Alex Wilkes from America Rising. She's the executive director. But Brett Kavanaugh sat there, a 51-year-old federal judge, telling Fox News tonight he was a virgin until he got into college. And, look, I actually think that's kind of admirable, that he waited a while. But having to admit personal details like that of your life on television, it just seems like he has gone through the roughest confirmation, short of, say, Clarence Thomas's confirmation, and that was a while ago.
I mean, you can just see the pain in their faces, and clearly the toll that this has taken on both Judge Kavanaugh and his wife. And I think that, look, I really admire their resolve to fight. But at the end of the day, they have two young daughters that they have to go and explain this to. Yeah. And, I think that, these details, it's funny because, I hear so much snark coming from the Beltway reporters and from various people out there. And as a Catholic school kid myself, I could tell you that there's nothing unusual with kids, refraining from sexual intercourse early in life, yep, or keeping the detailed calendars that everyone's making fun of him for keeping.
He sounds like a very organized guy. Alex, thank you very much for the time.